Welcome to the Slow Listening Podcast series, the show where we train your ears step by step.
Today, we're diving into something that affects all of us: how the way we talk to ourselves shapes our confidence and learning.
Julia listened to this question carefully. Have you ever thought you made a really dumb mistake?
I have. Sometimes that voice inside can be so quick to judge, and it's not always kind.
And that self talk can either push us forward or hold us back.
So here's a challenge for everyone listening. Pay close attention to your thoughts. Are they helping you grow or getting in your way?
If you've ever felt stuck or frustrated, this episode is for you. Let's learn to change that voice together, starting today.
And here's the surprising truth. You've been talking to yourself your whole life, whether you realize it or not.
We were inspired by the book How to Talk to Yourself by Roe Mitchell, and we'll use its ideas as the foundation for today's discussion.
And here's why you'll want to stay with us today. The book How to Talk to Yourself by Roe Mitchell is full of strategies to transform that inner voice. Reading the whole book might take you 6 to 8 hours. But in this episode, just 30 minutes, we'll bring you the best lessons. Think about that. Half an hour now saves you hours of reading later and gives you the tools to change a lifelong habit.
So let's dive in together. Today, you're not just listening, you're rewriting the script of your own mind. So let's start with a simple question. Julia, how often do you actually pay attention to the voice in your head?
That's a great way to begin. Honestly, I used to almost never notice it. My inner voice was like background noise. It was there all the time. But I didn't realize how much it influenced me until I started paying attention. And here's the thing. Most of the time, it wasn't kind. It was critical, impatient, and sometimes even cruel. Let me ask you, Martin, when you catch yourself thinking, are those thoughts usually supportive or judgmental?
If I'm being real, for years they were judgmental. If I made a mistake, I would call myself stupid or lazy or careless. And I thought that being hard on myself would push me to improve. But what actually happened, I just felt smaller, more anxious, less motivated. And I think many of our listeners can relate. Quick question for you, audience. If you had to describe your self talk right now in one word, what would it be? Encouraging, harsh, neutral? Take a second to think about it.
Yes. That's such an important reflection, because once you become aware of the quality of your self-talk, you realize it's like a constant companion. Imagine walking around all day with someone whispering in your ear. If that person is supportive, you feel stronger. If that person is critical, life feels heavier. And here's something fascinating. The voice we develop usually starts early in life. Childhood experiences, school, social comparisons, even social media. All of these shape how we speak to ourselves.
Exactly. I remember a time in school when I froze during a presentation. My classmates laughed, and from that day on, my inner voice kept repeating, "You're terrible at public speaking. Don't even try." And the crazy part? That voice stayed with me for years, long after the event itself. Julia, do you have a moment when your self talk began to turn negative?
Yes, definitely. For me, it was around body image. I compared myself to other girls in magazines and on TV, and I told myself, "You're not good enough." That became a loop in my head, and every time I looked in the mirror, the voice repeated it. It's heartbreaking how quickly those words become beliefs. And this brings us to a crucial point. The brain actually treats repeated thoughts like facts. So if you tell yourself every day that you're a failure, your brain starts to believe it.
That's huge. And it also explains why self talk can affect not just our emotions, but even our physiology. Think about it. When you say, I can't handle this, your body reacts with stress. Your heart races, your breathing gets shallow. On the other hand, if you say, this is tough, but I'll take it one step at a time, your body relaxes a little. Audience, have you ever noticed how a single thought can change how your body feels? That's the power of language.
And the language we use with ourselves matters even more than what others say to us, because we hear it constantly. And unfortunately, many of us use words we would never say to a friend. We call ourselves stupid, worthless, ugly, lazy. So here's a question for you, Martin. Why do you think it's easier to be compassionate to others than to ourselves?
I think it's because we're taught to value kindness toward others, but not toward ourselves. Society often praises self criticism as discipline. If you push yourself harder, people say you're strong. But actually, relentless self criticism just breaks you down. And that's why the shift to compassionate self talk is revolutionary. It's not indulgence, it's survival, it's growth.
Yes, and that shift starts with awareness. Here's a simple exercise. For one day, write down the sentences you hear in your head. Don't judge them, just collect them like a scientist. At the end of the day, look at your list. Are the sentences supportive or destructive? That awareness alone can be shocking.
I love that. And once you see the patterns, the next step is to challenge them. Let me give an example. Suppose you write down, I always fail. Now, is that true? Always? Or have you had successes too? When you ask these questions, you weaken the power of the negative statement. Julia, do you have a favorite technique for challenging negative self talk?
Yes, I like reframing. For example, instead of saying, I'm terrible at this, I try to say, I'm learning. I haven't mastered it yet, but I'm improving. The word yet is so powerful. It opens the door to growth. Audience, you can try this right now. Take a negative sentence you often tell yourself and add the word yet. Notice how it changes the feeling.
That's brilliant. And there's another tool I like, the friend test. Ask yourself, would I say this to a friend in the same situation? If the answer is no, then why say it to yourself? And here's a little secret. Your brain doesn't know the difference between real and imagined experiences. So when you practice kinder self talk, your brain begins to believe it, just as it once believed the negative loops.
Exactly. And this is where repetition comes in. Just like negative thoughts become beliefs through repetition, positive thoughts can too. But it takes practice. You can't say, I'm worthy once and expect your brain to change overnight. It's about building a habit of kindness. One practical way is affirmations. But, and I want to emphasize this, not empty, unrealistic affirmations. Saying, I'm the most successful person in the world, when you don't believe it will feel fake. Instead, use gentle, believable affirmations like, I'm learning to trust myself.
That's key. Start with something you can believe and pair it with action. For example, if you say, I'm capable of growth, then actually try something new, even if it's small. The action reinforces the thought. Julia, can you share a personal example of how affirmations or reframing worked for you?
Sure. A few years ago, I was terrified of speaking up in meetings. My inner voice said, "You'll sound stupid." So I started using a new phrase: "I have ideas worth sharing." At first, it felt uncomfortable, but each time I spoke, even a little, I reinforced that belief. Over time, the fear shrank. And that's the magic. Words plus repetition plus action equal to transformation.
Love that formula. And I think we should also talk about mindfulness because sometimes self talk spirals so fast we don't even notice it. Mindfulness, pausing, breathing, grounding creates a space where we can catch the thought before it controls us. Audience, next time you feel anxious, try this. Stop, take 3 slow breaths, and ask, "What did I just tell myself?" You'll be surprised by what you hear.
Yes. And mindfulness also helps us develop compassion. Because when we slow down, we realize that everyone struggles. You're not the only one with a critical inner voice. That shared humanity makes it easier to be kind to yourself. And kindness is not weakness, it's strength. It takes courage to change the way you speak to yourself after years of criticism.
Beautifully said. And that courage brings us to another idea: setbacks. Even when you start practicing positive self talk, you'll have days when the old voice comes back. That's normal. The point isn't perfection, it's persistence. Julia, what do you say to yourself when you catch the old critical voice returning?
I say, "Ah, there you are." I treat it like an old habit knocking on my door. I don't have to invite it in. I just notice it and return to my new habit. And that's important, noticing without judgment. If you judge yourself for having negative thoughts, you just create another layer of negativity.
That's so powerful. Audience, think about this. Can you notice your critical thoughts without fighting them? Can you let them pass like clouds in the sky? That's a practice worth trying.
And to close this part of our conversation, I want to highlight one big takeaway. Your self talk is not just noise, it's shaping your beliefs, your emotions, even your body. But the good news is, you can train it. You can transform it from an enemy into an ally. Martin, before we move forward, I want to ask you something. When you started to change your self talk, did it feel natural or was it awkward, almost like pretending?
Oh, it felt so fake at first. I remember standing in front of the mirror saying things like, "You're doing your best. You're learning." And my brain was like, "No, you're not. You're lying." It was uncomfortable, but here's what I discovered. At the beginning, it's not about believing the words instantly. It's about planting seeds. Over time, if you keep watering them, they grow into real beliefs.
Exactly. I think that's one of the biggest challenges. People expect instant results. They say, "I tried positive self talk once, and it didn't work." But the truth is, you need repetition. It's just like learning a language. You can't study English for one day and expect fluency. You need daily practice. Audience, think about how long you've been practicing negative self talk. Probably years, maybe decades. So it makes sense that changing it takes time.
That's such a good analogy. And speaking of practice, let's share some specific strategies that really work. One that I love is journaling. Every night, I write down 3 things: a negative thought I caught myself saying, how I can reframe it, something I'm grateful for, This way, I don't just notice the negativity, I actively rewrite it.
That's brilliant. And I do something similar. In the morning, I write what I call compassionate intentions. For example, today I'll speak kindly to myself when I make mistakes. It's like setting a gentle rule for the day. Martin, do you ever combine self talk with physical grounding, like breathing or movement?
Yes. In fact, one of my favorite practices is pairing affirmations with deep breathing. I inhale and think, I'm strong enough to face this, and I exhale and release tension. When the body and the words align, the message feels more real. Audience, you can try this right now with us. Take a deep breath in and silently say, I'm safe. Now breathe out and imagine letting go of stress. Doesn't that feel different?
I love that. And it's so accessible. You can do it at your desk, on the bus, anywhere. Another tool I want to share is visualization. When I catch myself being harsh, I imagine a supportive friend sitting next to me. I picture what they would say. Usually, it's much kinder than my own words. Then I borrow their voice.
That's powerful. And it connects to something else, creating a supportive inner coach. Imagine the best teacher you've ever had, the one who encouraged you, corrected you gently, believed in you. What if you let that voice live inside your head permanently? And here's a question for our listeners. Who would you choose as your inner coach? Maybe a teacher, a mentor, a parent, or even a fictional character. Picture their words guiding you.
That's such a fun exercise. I once had a student who chose Yoda from Star Wars as her inner coach. She said, whenever she felt nervous, she imagined Yoda whispering, "Calm, you must be." It worked for her because it made her smile and relax. So don't be afraid to be playful. Self talk doesn't have to be heavy, it can be creative.
I love that example. And here's another angle: environment. Who we spend time with influences our inner dialogue. If you're surrounded by people who constantly criticize, your self talk will echo that. But if you're with people who lift you up, you absorb their language. Julia, have you ever noticed how friendships shape your inner voice?
Absolutely. I used to have a group of friends who were very sarcastic. They teased each other all the time. At first, I thought it was harmless, but I realized their words echoed in my head as self-criticism. When I moved into a more supportive circle, my self-talk softened too. So, audience, take a look at your relationships. Are they feeding your critical voice or your compassionate one?
That's so important. And I think we should address a common fear here. People worry that if they're kind to themselves, they'll become lazy. They think, if I stop criticizing myself, I'll never improve. Julia, what do you say to that?
I say the opposite is true. Imagine a coach who constantly screams at their athletes, "You're useless. You'll never win." Do you think those athletes will perform well? Probably not. They'll feel crushed. Now imagine a coach who says, "You've got this. Mistakes are part of learning. Keep going." That athlete is much more likely to thrive. Self-talk works the same way. Compassion fuels growth.
Yes. And this is supported by psychology too. Studies show that self-compassion leads to greater resilience, persistence, and even better performance. Criticism might give you a short burst of energy, but compassion sustains you for the long run. Audience, think about it. When was the last time harsh words actually made you improve? And when was the last time encouragement helped you try again?
That's a perfect reflection. And speaking of trying again, we should talk about setbacks. Because no matter how much you practice positive self talk, you'll have days when the critical voice shouts louder. What matters is how you respond. Instead of saying, I failed at being positive, you can say, this is part of the process. It's about progress, not perfection.
I completely agree. One technique I use is giving my inner critic a nickname. Mine is the judge. When it speaks up, I say, thanks, judge, but I'm not interested right now. It helps me separate the thought from my identity. Julia, do you use something similar?
Yes, I call mine the parrot because it just repeats old lines it learned years ago. When I hear it, I imagine a little bird on my shoulder squawking nonsense. That image makes it less threatening and sometimes even funny. Audience, maybe you can try naming your inner critic too. Give it a silly name and see how much easier it becomes to ignore.
That's such a good idea, and humor is underrated in self growth. Laughing at the inner critic takes away its power. Now, before we wrap up this part, I want to highlight another strategy: gratitude. Writing down 3 things you're grateful for each day shifts your focus. It trains your brain to look for the positive instead of the negative. Over time, gratitude becomes the default voice in your head.
Yes, gratitude is like rewiring your brain. And it doesn't have to be big things. It can be as simple as, I'm grateful for my morning coffee, or I'm grateful for the smile of a stranger. Audience, what's one small thing you feel grateful for right now? Say it out loud or write it down. Notice how it changes your mood instantly.
Beautiful. So, to summarize this part of our conversation, self talk feels awkward at first, but practice makes it natural. Journaling, reframing, breathing, visualization, and gratitude are powerful tools. Your environment shapes your inner voice. Compassion is not laziness, it's the fuel for resilience. Setbacks are normal, and humor can be your secret weapon. Julia, I think these are the building blocks of a healthier relationship with ourselves.
I agree. And in the next part, let's go even deeper. Let's talk about how compassionate self talk influences relationships, work, and long term identity. Because the way we speak to ourselves doesn't just stay inside, it changes how we show up in the world.
Yes, I'm excited for that. So stay with us, listeners, because we're about to explore how transforming your inner voice can transform your entire life. Julia, you mentioned something at the end of our last part that really struck me. The way we talk to ourselves doesn't stay inside, it spills into how we interact with the world. Can we dig deeper into that?
Of course. Think about this. If your self talk is harsh, you probably approach relationships with insecurity. You might over apologize, avoid conflict, or doubt your worth. But if your self talk is compassionate, you show up with confidence, patience, and openness. In other words, the dialogue you have with yourself becomes the tone of your dialogue with everyone else.
Yes, I've noticed that too. When I was deeply self critical, I was defensive with others. If someone gave me feedback, I heard it as an attack, because my own inner critic was already attacking me. Once I softened my self talk, feedback became easier to accept. Audience, have you ever noticed that how you treat yourself sets the stage for how you treat others?
And it's not just relationships, it's work too. Imagine going into a job interview. If your self talk says, "You're going to mess this up," your body will tense and your answers will sound uncertain. But if your self talk says, "You're prepared, you've got value to share," you walk in taller, calmer, more persuasive. That's the invisible power of inner language.
Exactly. And this is where we can talk about identity. Because over time, self talk doesn't just describe us, it defines us. If you keep saying, "I'm shy" or "I'm unlucky," those words become part of your identity. But if you change the script to, "I'm learning to be more confident," or "I'm creating opportunities," your identity shifts too. Julia, do you remember a moment when changing your inner language changed your identity?
Yes, I do. For years, I told myself, "I'm bad with technology." It was a fixed identity. Then I decided to reframe it. "I'm learning new tools step by step." That simple shift opened doors. I started experimenting, asking for help, even teaching others. I went from bad with technology to curious about technology. So the words we choose don't just reflect who we are, they sculpt who we become.
That's powerful, and it makes me wonder, what hidden identities are our listeners carrying right now because of their self talk? Maybe someone keeps saying, "I'm always anxious," or "I'm not creative." What if those aren't facts, but just habits of language? Audience, here's a challenge. Pick one limiting phrase you say about yourself and reframe it into a growth phrase. Write it down, repeat it daily. Watch how your sense of self evolves.
That's a fantastic exercise. And I'd add another: speak your reframed identity out loud. There's something about hearing your own voice that makes it more real. It's like giving yourself permission to change.
Yes, because the inner voice and the outer voice are connected. The more you speak kindly to yourself, the more authentic your words to others become. And I think we should address something really human here: setbacks in relationships with ourselves. Sometimes we make progress, then fall back into old patterns. Julia, what's your advice when that happens?
First, I remind myself that healing is not linear. Imagine a graph. It's not a straight line up, it's a zigzag. Some days are better, some worse, but the overall direction matters. Second, I practice self forgiveness. Instead of saying, "I ruined everything," I say, "Today was tough, but tomorrow is another chance." Forgiveness resets the cycle.
That's so important. Because if we punish ourselves for negative self talk, we just create more negativity. Forgiveness is like a reset button. Audience, what, have you ever forgiven yourself out loud? Try it. Say, "I forgive myself for being hard on me today." Notice how it feels in your body.
Yes. And forgiveness connects to compassion. Compassion means understanding that you're human, imperfect, and still worthy of kindness. It's not about excusing mistakes. It's about recognizing that mistakes don't define your value.
Exactly. And here's where things get exciting. When you consistently practice compassionate self talk, you start to experience resilience. Life will still bring challenges, anxiety, stress, failure, but your response changes. Instead of collapsing, you bounce back. That's the gift of training your inner voice.
And it's not only about resilience, it's also about joy. Negative self talk narrows your focus to flaws and problems. Positive self talk opens your eyes to beauty, gratitude, and possibility. You literally experience more joy because you give yourself permission to see it.
That's beautiful. And it reminds me of nature. No matter what happens in our personal lives, the sun still rises, the waves still move, the world continues. Self talk is like tuning into that rhythm, remembering that setbacks are temporary, but life keeps flowing. Audience, next time you feel overwhelmed, step outside and notice something constant: the sky, the trees, the air. Let it remind you that your inner storms will pass.
I love that image. And let's bring this down to very practical advice for our listeners. Martin, if someone wants to start transforming their self talk today, what's the first step you'd recommend?
Step 1: Awareness. Spend one day noticing the sentences in your head. Write them down. Awareness is the foundation. Without it, you can't change anything. Step 2: Challenge. Ask, is this thought true? Always? Can I see it differently? Step 3: Replace. Reframe the negative into something constructive and compassionate. And step 4: Repeat. Do it again and again until it becomes a habit.
That's a perfect roadmap. And I'd add step 5: celebrate. Celebrate small wins. If you caught one negative thought and replaced it today, that's progress. Clap for yourself, smile, acknowledge the effort. Audience, please don't underestimate small victories. They add up to big transformations.
Absolutely. And since this is your English toolbox, let me connect it to language learning for a second. Many learners say to themselves, I'll never be fluent, or my accent is terrible. That's negative self talk and it blocks progress. But if they change the script to I'm improving every day, or my accent shows I'm bilingual and that's powerful, they learn faster. The inner voice shapes the learning journey.
Yes, I've seen students blossom when they stop attacking themselves for mistakes. Mistakes are not proof of failure, they're proof of growth. So, listeners, if you're learning English or any skill, remember, the words you use inside will determine how far you go outside.
Exactly. And before we wrap up, I want to leave our audience with one final thought. Your self talk is a lifelong companion. You can't escape it, but you can choose whether it's a critic or a coach, an enemy or a friend.
And my final message is this: be patient. Transforming self talk is like building a new friendship with yourself. It takes time, but it's worth it. Imagine living every day with a supportive best friend in your mind. That's what's possible.
So, to recap everything we've covered across this conversation, self talk shapes emotions, body, identity, and relationships. Negative voices often come from early experiences but can be transformed. Tools like journaling, reframing, affirmations, breathing, visualization, gratitude, humor, and self forgiveness really work. Compassion isn't indulgence, it's resilience. And your inner words don't just stay inside, they change how you live, love, and grow.
So, before we close, let's talk about something really important. Changing your self talk isn't just about you, it's about us, this community we're building together. Because when you share the words you're choosing, someone else reads them, and suddenly they feel less alone. Think about the micro tasks we practiced today. We asked you to add the word yet to a negative thought. Which one did you choose? We suggested you give your inner critic a nickname. Did you call it the judge, the parrot, something funnier? We encouraged you to write down one gentle affirmation you actually believe. What's yours?
These aren't just private exercises. If you share them in the comments, you're planting ideas for other learners. You become part of their journey.
And here's why this matters. Our channel is not about passive listening. It's about slow listening plus active living. If you only listen, the lesson stays in your ears. If you comment, the lesson travels into your hands, your voice, your identity.
So I want to challenge you. Be brave today. Comment one of three things.
The negative sentence you transformed with yet,
The nickname you gave your inner critic.
or the affirmation you'll start repeating to yourself this week.
Choose one. Post it below. Because your comment isn't just for us, it's for every person who reads it and thinks, yes, me too. I can try that.
Imagine what happens when dozens of people start sharing. Suddenly, you don't feel like a single listener. You feel like part of a circle, a movement, a team practicing together.
So let's make this the moment where our comment section becomes alive. Let's make it a safe place to share inner voices, struggles, and victories.
Remember, listen slowly, learn deeply, and speak confidently. See you in the next episode.